Hi, everyone. Great to see you over here with us again this year. Excited that we're back together to think about the future of how DeFi and Web3 and TradFi and the capital markets merge together into an Internet of Contracts. Excited to see everyone so well dressed. Nice shirts. So excited that we're all here together. The fundamental goal that we have here together is to create a standard, and for that standard to create a single Internet of Contracts. That standard needs to work across both the Web3 DeFi world and the TradFi capital markets world, because those are the two worlds that are going to collide and create the big financial economic boom when they become a single global Internet of Contracts. So our fundamental goal is to become that standard. Right now, these two worlds are evolving in two separate ways, the Web3 DeFi world and the TradFi capital markets world. We've already made a lot of progress winning and becoming the standard for Web3 DeFi, powering the majority of it. And now we're making a lot of progress becoming the TradFi capital market standard. The final goal that we want is all of these applications working with each other, agreeing on price, agreeing on how to transact value, agreeing on how the application operates and proves security to each other and counterparties over the Chainlink set of standards. That is our fundamental goal. That is what success looks like, to create the global standard that powers the Internet of Contracts and creates the economic boom that will come from the merging of these two worlds into this large global market. We've been making a lot of progress with the capital markets and TradFi community, in addition to the Web3 community. We have implementations on production for large asset managers. We have multiple collaborations with large financial market infrastructures, and we're in different stages of implementations with some of the biggest banks, financial market infrastructures, and asset managers. So just like we have already successfully as a community made Chainlink a global standard for the Web3 DeFi community, this year we've made a huge amount of progress towards being in the leadership position for creating that standard for the TradFi capital markets community. We've done this by providing a set of services, a set of individual services, data services, proof of reserves, identity, cross-chain, computational services, directly into contracts. But one of the things that we've learned along the way from providing all these services, and Chainlink provides the largest universe of services for all data, connectivity, and does it on a single platform in a way that no other system in the industry, in the blockchain industry, does today. What we've actually learned is that there needs to be a way to weave together all of these services, all of the different blockchains and smart contracts, all the different payment systems into a single unified application. If you look at the history of financial applications, you'll basically see that each economic boom in the financial system is created through the simplification of how to use new technologies. In the 70s, when the first databases appeared, you had the first successful runtime, which was COBOL, simplify interaction with databases, simplify interaction with the first computing systems, successfully creating the first electronic transactions, the first banking transactions in the 70s. This was done by creating a runtime technology, so a low-level computing technology that coordinates various other systems into a single application by running a single piece of code. That is what created the big economic boom from computing in the financial industry. It was COBOL and the COBOL runtime. Then new technologies emerged, new database technologies, the internet and internet protocols, various languages, and financial systems and financial applications had to evolve to interact with that new complexity, with the new databases, the new languages, and the internet. The Java Runtime Environment, the JRE, is what simplified that in the 90s. By simplifying that in the 90s, it gave rise to web application and online banking, just like COBOL gave rise to ATMs and in-person banking. So if you've ever used an ATM, or you've ever gone into a bank and spoken to a teller, at some point you were a user of COBOL code. And if you've ever done online banking or used a web-based payment system, at some point you were interacting with the Java runtime environment. This is the simple truth of the fundamental technologies that defined how the world worked for 20, 30 years. And this is actually the opportunity we have in front of us as all of the world's value migrates into this new blockchain format across hundreds of different chains and across thousands of different Oracle networks. The opportunity really comes along every 20 to 30 years, and it's about unifying all these separate systems into a single application and allowing developers and people building those financial applications not to do that in years or months, but in days and eventually hours. And even if we provide all the best services, all the best data services, all the best identity services, all the best connectivity services, that won't be enough. It'll be very good, and it's what's taken DeFi from sub 100 million to over 200 billion. It's already created its own little mini economic boom in the Web3 world, so we know that that works. The next challenge is how to make a much bigger boom by allowing developers to build applications that are very advanced, very quickly. That is the history of runtime environments and the history of how they have affected the financial system. This is why we're announcing that we are making the Chainlink runtime environment. The Chainlink runtime environment, the CRE, seeks to play the same role that COBOL and JRE played in the previous big financial booms of the 70s and of the 90s. Just like COBOL coordinated the very first databases into the first core banking transactions, and JRE converted modern database technologies and the internet into the first online banking transactions, the CRE, the Chainlink runtime environment, is what is built to coordinate the different blockchain technologies, Oracle networks, and smart contracts into a single unified application. This is the thing that we think is missing from all of our interactions with the largest infrastructures, banks, asset managers. And this is historically what has enabled them to build advanced applications. A single environment where they can go in, use their existing data, their existing systems, together with the new technology. In the past, that was basic databases and then web databases. Now it's blockchains and smart contracts. And nobody is in a better position to simplify that problem. Because to simplify that problem, you both need to provide the services that the smart contracts need, which we obviously do better than any other system in the entire industry and really ever in history so far. And what we've realized from all of our work with these large institutions is that their model of consuming new technology is to have it simplified for them through a runtime environment, through a single computational environment where they can put code to coordinate all of the different systems into a single application. This is how it's worked for 50, 60 years. This is simply the pattern that they want. And if we provide this pattern and the environment to do it together with the services that they need to build the applications, then I genuinely believe that not only will we enable this next economic boom, but we will be at the very epicenter of it. So let's see how this works. Basically, the CRE accepts existing languages, right now Go and TypeScript with other languages to come, which means that you as an engineer can write a workflow, CRE workflow code, that coordinates multiple existing systems, data APIs, payment systems like Swift, computational resources, AI computations, confidential computations, TEs, all these computing resources, into a single application. And it can unify all of those existing resources with hundreds of blockchains. So while we already make the services, and we're on track to continue to make all the best services for consuming data, payments, identity by smart contracts, we now need to make that easy to consume and to weave into unified smart contracts, the more advanced version of smart contracts. This takes taking the existing systems, data, payments, and compute, and merging it together with blockchains across hundreds of chains. And there has to be an environment that does that coordination. There has to be a place that runs the computation to manage the app, to manage the smart contract across multiple places. That's basically what we are now announcing into early access. And it's what results in a kind of unified smart contract model where you can still run a primary smart contract on a chain like Ethereum, but then that smart contract, through the workflow code, is unified with all data, all payments, all other chains into a single application. So your interaction with your systems, your interaction with data, your interaction with payments is simplified, just like Cobalt and the Java runtime environment simplified that interaction in previous big financial booms and enabled that level of simplification. This is now going into early access sign-up, and it's something that we are planning to release more generally in 2025 after all of the relevant audits and security reviews are completed. The CRE is also something that we've started to implement with certain select key user groups that can benefit immediately from the simplification of a lot of complexity into a single unified application and smart contract that functions across multiple chains but is administered by a single piece of code. The demo that was given recently at Sibos is running on the CRE. So the demonstration that was given last week at Sibos of using the Swift network is actually already running on the CRE. This is the diagram for what we were saying we were going to build with Swift a year ago. This is a diagram of the second pilot, where essentially Swift messages and blockchain events become interchangeable, both for triggering blockchain events and for payments, basically making Swift systems extremely usable for interacting with blockchains as an interface and as a payment resource. So that's a very complicated problem, and it's a problem that we've been working on for years, and it's very complicated to solve. But when we applied the CRE to solving the problem, we were able to solve it much faster with a fraction of the technical resources by writing a single piece of Go code that coordinated the Swift network against multiple blockchains. And the speed and quality at which we were able to do this was, for me personally, quite shocking. Because for the 7+ years I've been working on getting Swift messages to interact properly with different blockchains, it's a complicated process. And the CRE made it genuinely simple so that a small amount of engineering resources could coordinate one complicated system with multiple other blockchains. The flow that we demonstrated last week in Sibos to the financial community, which was extremely well received, was the ability for Swift messages to coordinate an agreement, for that coordinated agreement to then result in an on-chain event in the form of locking an asset in the anticipation of a payment, that locking of an asset to trigger a payment flow within the Swift network, so a real payment transaction would happen, and that payment transaction using Swift messages could then be converted to a blockchain event, and using actual Swift messages in the formatting that they use, and then that blockchain event would unlock the asset on the first chain and transfer it across chains to the other chains. So this is much more real than things have ever been with the interaction of blockchains and a very complex system like Swift. And the Go code that operates this was written by a handful of engineers pretty quickly. That, to me, is very impressive, because I actually know this problem, I know its complexity, I know how many things would need to be coordinated and managed securely. And not only was that complexity simplified for one chain, but using CCIP, it was simplified across chains. And so now that piece of Go code running in the Chainlink runtime environment simplifies this immensely complicated problem with the real types of messages for blockchains in anticipation of a state where you would actually be on production. From what I can tell, that's a really, really big step forward. And we've gotten a lot of interest from the Swift and the capital markets community about this flow and implementing it. But the really exciting thing for me is once they understand how efficient it will be for them to implement in the computational model that they are already used to. Because once again, our goal is to create a standard. And the goal is only achieved when people adopt a standard, and to adopt it, it needs to be simple and to provide a lot of value. The services, the cross-chain services, the data services, the identity services provide a lot of value. The hundreds of blockchains where there's more and more money for people to transact on provide a lot of value. The challenge is now to take all of that value and make it very simple to interact with and build applications around. So I'm very excited that we made all of this progress. A lot of it is thanks to our new chief architect, Uri, who will be up on stage in a few minutes to describe in more detail how the CRE works, how it actually operates, and the key technical assumptions that it makes. It's very exciting, and it's something that I think is going to take the whole Chainlink community and what developers are able to build within Chainlink through workflow code, essentially defining their application in that way from the beginning, to a whole next level. So excited to hear what Uri has to tell all of us, but I know it's really great, and it'll be very interesting. Uri also has a very storied history in creating great open source standards that already power a lot of the financial system. He was previously the CTO of MuleSoft, which is a very widely adopted way of dealing with APIs in the financial industry. The next key problem that we've clearly seen from the capital markets and the TradFi industry is privacy. If you don't create privacy for transactions for a group of people and a group of transactions that are already built with privacy today, you're basically not going to do transactions. If there isn't privacy for all kinds of critical parts of the transaction, you will not get to the point of real global adoption by the capital markets community. This is why we've started to release tools and services like the Blockchain Privacy Manager, which is a tool to manage privacy across various chains by defining what information can and can't leave a chain. And then we ourselves have applied that tool to CCIP to create privacy for CCIP transactions, creating the first CCIP private transactions. These CCIP private transactions are very unique and valuable because they maintain a previously unreached level of privacy for an institutional transaction. And that new level of privacy makes that group very comfortable, or much more comfortable, in transmitting value in the blockchain format. You'll hear in a few minutes from Anurag, who's the product lead for digital assets at ANZ, a trillion asset under management bank, where he'll describe his own views as a consumer and user of these technologies, both of them. And I think you'll see that the ability to provide privacy is quite valuable. And just to be super clear, Anurag is a product leader in an institution with 1 trillion assets under management. 3 of these institutions add up to more than the total cryptocurrency industry. And there are thousands of these institutions. So what we're really looking at is making people like Anurag able to make financial applications that flow that value into our industry to the benefit of our industry's growth and success. That is the economic boom that us solving these problems and us creating these standards will successfully create. That is what we are doing here. And so I'm excited for you to hear Anurag's view and the value he sees in these technologies. What Anurag and other product leaders and engineering leaders like him should experience in the TradFi capital markets community is the ability to easily inject any data they want into a blockchain, the ability for the privacy of their transactions to be managed to the level that they expect from transactions generally, and for those transactions, smart contracts, blockchains, to be synchronized with their existing systems. If these 3 problems are solved, then they are more than happy to flow hundreds of billions, eventually trillions of dollars into the blockchain industry. If they remain unsolved, then that value will not flow into our industry. So our goal is to solve these problems, to flow that value into our industry, and take it to a new, more serious, larger level, creating the economic boom that will go on to define it. The need for cross-chain, I think at this point is obvious, because without cross-chain, you can't do transactions for value stuck in other chains. And then the conclusion of those transactions also requires data, privacy, and synchronization with existing systems and standards like Swift. We've already done an amazing job as a community powering DeFi, powering the best DeFi protocols, keeping them secure for many years, processing trillions of dollars in transaction value successfully. That is amazing, and we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to improve the technology that does that to create a standard there. But I am convinced that the DeFi community will and already does, see the TradFi community as their biggest user base. If that is true, which it is, from like the hundreds of meetings that we've had at this point with both of those communities, it's pretty clear that the valuable tool set and the valuable set of standards is the tool set and standards that unify these two groups into a functioning market, which means you need to meet the requirements of both groups. You need to make them both able to transact with each other within the group and then between groups. That is what we're doing, at this point, increasingly successfully, which I am personally very proud of. The other aspect of privacy is data privacy. After many years and lots of conversations with many teams that value data privacy, the DECO Sandbox is being released here at SmartCon for public consumption. The DECO Sandbox basically allows zero-knowledge proofs to be generated about any piece of data, identity data, proof of funds, proof of anything. And it's being released in a format where any developer can go and start utilizing it to apply zero-knowledge proofs to any API and to prove things about the data from that API in a way that keeps the data private, but allows the data to be used on a chain. That's a very clear example of a problem that wasn't solved. So in the past, if you wanted to put identity data on a chain, you were stuck either revealing the identity data, which was completely unacceptable for most identity systems, or you don't put the identity data, in which case you don't have identity, which is a hard requirement for many transactions. Many transactions can't happen without identity. It's not the DeFi Web3 world where you can be anonymous and pseudonymous. And just to be super duper clear, while the Web3 DeFi world is an amazing place that I'm extremely grateful and happy to be a part of, the way it's going to grow is all the money from the other place coming into it. So the challenge now is not just making Web3 and DeFi work, it's getting the value from this other place to flow in there in a simplified, unified way. DECO is a great example of this. I encourage you to try it if you're a developer, see how it works. We're excited to get your feedback. If you're in the institutional world and you have identity problems, you have proof of funds problems, you have sanction screening problems, you have any problem where you're trying to prove something to a contract, to a smart contract, but you want to keep the original data private, that is now a solved problem for you. And if that was a blocker for you to get a contract into production in order to get value from your clients and your systems onto a blockchain, that problem is now solved. I encourage everybody to go see Lorenz's talk tomorrow. Lorenz will give a very exciting and interesting presentation about how this works in more detail and walk everyone through how they can use this exciting system and service, which is now, after many years of research, security analysis, development, and conversation with users, is going into a state where it's becoming usable and kind of testable by different groups so that they can start implementing it. So that's another very exciting development. So far, the Chainlink community has enabled over $16 trillion worth of transaction value. That's very impressive. But the majority of that has come from the DeFi community. I personally think the DeFi community in and of itself can generate much more value than this. But it will need the value from this other community, the existing capital markets and TradFi community, in order to do that. The existing Chainlink system has also delivered the most messages, the most verified messages of any system, whether that's messages for cross-chain, data, all of these different resources. If you add all those up, you get to the most verified messages of any system that has been securely putting information and messages on chain. So I think we've hit a kind of critical inflection point where we can continue to make the Web3 DeFi industry successful. But really what we need to do is expand the market by merging that industry with the existing capital markets industry in an efficient way. Our data adoption in the DeFi Web3 industry remains very high, with the top protocols relying on Chainlink data feeds. And the proof of reserves category of data that is now basically becoming a standard for how to define reliable RWAs and reliable stablecoins and reliable commodity coins is being rapidly adopted. So just like Chainlink made a data feed standard for price and market data, it is now very quickly creating the standard for proof of reserves as a critical component of a reliable RWA. And it will be a critical component of an RWA in public chains, in private chains, and it will be a critical component for transactions between those two places, such that if you have a stable coin, a commodity coin, or an RWA issued in either of those places, the Web3 community or the TradFi community, and if it doesn't have sufficient levels of proof of reserve, then it won't be accepted in either community. Just like people don't like to put value in protocols that aren't operated by secure Chainlink data feeds. So we are successfully creating more and more data standards based on security that define whether users will or will not put their value into a smart contract. That is a very big deal, because if you define the standards that determine whether users do or do not put value into a smart contract, then you are on track to define how smart contracts are built, which is, once again, our fundamental goal. One of the things you'll hear about today, as well, is the Smart Data Standard, which is an expansion of the types and amounts of data feeds that are available for what is called asset servicing. This includes NAV data, yield amounts, AUM, all kinds of pieces of data that we're already serving both to the Web3 DeFi community and live in production on chain to large institutional managers like Fidelity smart contracts, live in production. So the Smart Data Standard is an expansion of proof of reserves into more types of data, and it gives rise to what we call smart assets, which are assets that are properly informed and controlled by highly reliable data. I encourage you to listen to Gando's talk, which is coming up in a few minutes after mine, where he and some of the other product managers working on the different aspects of smart data, smart assets, proof of reserves, and other aspects of the Chainlink data protocol will give you a very thoughtful update about how putting more reliable data on chain will lead to these smart assets, and how this smart data standard is emerging beyond market prices and proof of reserves into many other types of data. This is a good example of a standard that counterparties need in order to transact, that we have now expanded past one or two pieces of data and are now expanding into many pieces of data, so that the way to create assets is based on using this highly reliable, Chainlink-powered, signed, and verified data. And we do continue to see the user bases of those applications choosing whether or not to use the application based on the reliability created by the various guarantees of these systems. So it's very exciting to see Chainlink's important role in defining what secure and reliable means. CCIP, the cross-chain interoperability protocol, is something that is continuing to gain very rapid adoption for, I would say, the right reasons. Generally, what we've started to see is that the security properties of CCIP are finally starting to be valued by the market, and the advanced features, like programmable token transfers, are also starting to become more and more valued. Here, we're releasing talking about the release, like a couple of days or something, about the self-serve deployment capability of CCIP, and putting into private beta the token attestation feature that allows the creator of a token to participate in its security by operating a separate service that views and signs or doesn't sign transactions, letting them contribute to the security of their token. The other key feature that I've always been extremely excited about is programmable token transfers. And programmable token transfers is something that's also getting wide adoption. The attestation service already has initial users going live with it. And it's something that I think will expand the security guarantees of CCIP, which is once again the focus of how the Chainlink community should be building things, providing the greatest amount of security and reliability for all of these services. One of the most exciting pieces of news for CCIP is its adoption by Lido as a one-step staking solution for multiple chains in an efficient, reliable way using the programmable token transfers feature. The programmable token transfers feature basically simplifies an application's interaction across chains down to a single transaction that includes the value and the critical information of the transaction as a set of instructions that are executed on the target chain. It's really one of the most exciting features that I think the market is now starting to appreciate and implement. And when you combine it with the security of CCIP, I think it puts CCIP far and above any other cross-chain system. And that's what we're starting to see validated by adoption by some of the most security-sensitive users like Lido. We're also seeing CCIP get adopted as the canonical bridge solution of multiple chains. A canonical bridge is the official native bridge of that chain. And because there weren't reliable bridge technologies, blockchains basically built their own bridges. They created native bridges with long delays, 7-day settlement times, and they had to invest a lot of value and money and resources into building their own official bridge. Now we see a very clear trend of very security-sensitive blockchains evaluating all the different bridge solutions and giving the responsibility of being the canonical native bridge of that chain to CCIP. And there's a greater and greater amount of chains making this decision. And that decision is once again based on the evaluation of CCIP's security, which is what it was built for. This is generally the other very big pattern, that when you build services in a very security-sensitive space, like the blockchain space, if you build the most secure service, you have a huge advantage in getting adoption. This is the experience we had with data feeds, where there were different providers of data feeds, and the market kind of chose Chainlink as the standard because of its security guarantees. This is the fundamental thesis of the Chainlink services. Being able to take those very secure services and compose them together with all the different chains into a single application through one piece of code written in a language that developers already know about is really the next stage of both Chainlink's evolution and, together with Chainlink, the industry's evolution. So I think all of these folks that chose CCIP as the canonical bridge will see their canonical bridge get more and more usage through the Chainlink runtime environment. And there will be a positive virtual cycle there where the more Chainlink runtime environment adoption there is, the more users there are that can easily use your bridge because they're on the Chainlink runtime environment computing standard and they're writing their smart contract coordination in the workflow code in their preferred language. Go, TypeScript, soon other languages that are under consideration are things like Rust and others. What the adoption of CCIP by Lido is really starting to create is the creation of a composability layer for these liquid staking tokens over CCIP. And that's only possible because of the combination of all the different CCIP services and the advanced features inside of CCIP like programmable token transfers. The other exciting development around CCIP is cross-chain billing. There's now a contract and audit for a billing mechanism and a reserve contract that is able to take payment in various tokens. What this does is it simplifies the payment for a Chainlink service by reducing friction, because the fundamental goal of the system is to get usage and payment in whatever format people want to pay in. It then converts those payments into Link tokens that are then paid to the node operators and service providers that provide the security to create the service, the protocol, and in this case, the CCIP services. Every different part of the Chainlink ecosystem and set of services is actually evolving in different markets that eventually get interconnected through the services. But data feed, streams, CCIP, automation, CRE eventually will all evolve at their own speed and in their own markets. Right now, the goal of the vast majority of those services and markets should be market adoption, should be optimizing for being a standard by providing a very high quality, very secure service at a very attractive price, while conditioning the developers of smart contracts to build them in a way where they're integrating billing and they're getting used to paying for that service through on-chain transactions. But the fundamental goal of CCIP and the other services that I'll show you that are also going to be implementing their own unified billing capabilities is still adoption. Because the goal that we have is to create a standard. And the way you create a standard is you provide quality and price over time to become a standard that is used to being paid for in some way, and then as the standard grows and becomes ubiquitous, from that volume and that standard position, that is where the value eventually flows in the form of revenue, and in this case gets converted into Link and paid to the service providers. You can learn more about CCIP, the billing system, and all these other nuances in the presentation tomorrow from Rahul. He'll have a lot to say about how CCIP is evolving, how the billing standard applies to its evolution, and how it's basically going to be providing even more features, self-service tokens, and all of these more advanced capabilities. We're also seeing a lot of adoption in the low latency data space. The data stream service is now reliably converting users away from competing services and away from home-baked solutions. We ourselves have done a lot of testing and a lot of analysis on the latency of the data stream service and its reliability and uptime. And from our analysis, what we can see is that it's the most reliable and fastest low latency data service there is in the industry. And when we show this analysis and explain it to the industry, they switch. So basically, if you can make the most reliable and secure service that provides the most critical feature, in this case, low latency data, you can be a standard and convert that entire category of data users, in this case, perp dexes, to being your user base. We're continuing to see existing users launch with data streams on other chains, and users on those chains, including Solana and others, work on switching their system over to streams. That's because at this point, from our analysis, it has become the best product on multiple dimensions. It will also be implementing a unified billing set of contracts. It'll be implementing it at its own pace for its own market under its own set of conditions. It'll be looking to convert the revenue from that into Link tokens at some point relative to its own economic development, at its own speed. And in my opinion, it should focus on adoption and market share, which means that it should implement the billing system, and it should condition the market to pay for services, but it should optimize for adoption and market share, because that's what creates a standard. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get everybody speaking the same language. We're trying to get everybody who's used to using perp dexes or used to using cross-chain systems to simply view CCIP or streams as the secure standard. And that's what's going to lead to long-term adoption, market share, and eventually, as the industry grows, volume. I encourage you to hear Rahul tomorrow, where he will describe in more detail how Streams is developing, how users are converting over from other services and their own home-baked solutions, and how the security guarantees and other properties of Streams are allowing it to win over users consistently. At this point, we are consistently seeing one after another perp dex user shut down their existing solution, switch from some other solution over to Streams, similarly to what we saw on the data feeds side of Chainlink's adoption in the early to mid period of its growth. So that's another example of a data standard we're creating, where we've successfully, as a community, made a more secure, more reliable service, and it's now getting adopted, where the market share numbers are slowly growing and going more and more in its favor. So our fundamental goal as a group is to create this standard, to propagate it across the Web3 DeFi world, to propagate it across the TradFi capital markets world, to get everybody speaking the same language, whether that's about data, connectivity, identity, and in the form of CRE, how to make all of that work together in a reliable way where the application that it creates can be trusted. If we do that successfully, I really do think we can be the ones that not only create the next economic boom in our industry, but are the group and the set of technologies that power it. The unified smart contract that I'm showing you here is really the way that I believe applications will be built in the smart contract and blockchain industries, because it is really the history of computation. There has to be a system that simplifies all of the interactions between data, payments, identity, various blockchains, confidential computing, AI models. And historically, there has always been a system that emerges that simplifies that complexity and unifies all of those services in a single runtime, in a single computing environment, running a single piece of code. That's the history of financial computing. It's pretty clear to me that even if we generate all the great services, even if we interconnect all the blockchains, there will still be this friction for building these applications. And taking that friction away is extremely important and valuable, because the service and the runtime and the environment where that friction is resolved will be the place that developers code the fundamentals of their application, and it will take them from doing it over the course of months and weeks to days or eventually hours. And very excitingly, in this case, even in languages they already know, like Go, TypeScript, and with other languages under evaluation like Rust, and then others. I think the CRE really is the final piece of the puzzle for us. It's this thing in the system that's going to enable the interconnection of hundreds of Oracle networks, thousands of chains, all the world's data, all the world's payment systems into a single application. And I really do believe that if we're able to pull it off and get it into the hands of the right developers, we already have the services, we already have the integrations with the relevant chains, we're getting the integrations with all the largest existing payment systems, we already have AI working on Oracle networks, confidential computing is entirely possible on Oracle networks in this model. If we can provide all of that through a single service and platform that people can interact with using their existing languages and models for building applications, then I think eventually the vast majority of blockchain-based applications can be built through this standard. What that would result in for all of us is a globally interconnected set of contracts, creating what I call the Internet of Contracts. And while CCIP will be the low-level protocol, and while the Chainlink data standards will be the low-level data protocols, and while they will transmit lots of identity information, they will transmit price information, they will transmit proof of everything else information, once we can coordinate all that information, and once we can coordinate all those connections in a single environment with a single reliable piece of code that can be proven to counterparties as being reliable, that is when I think things will really accelerate for both our industry and for the adoption of the Chainlink standard, partly because the industry will massively grow with a technology like this, in my opinion, and because the technology that lets the industry grow in this way will be at the epicenter of its growth. So this is the very exciting kind of new direction and development that we have, thanks to many of the people that you'll see speaking soon after me. Thank you for your attention, and stay around to hear what they have to say. I'll be on in a few minutes after them to give you some concluding thoughts and statements. It's going to be good.